The great chamber stretched wide like a metal canyon, its walls rising up into shadows where lights barely reached. 47 different species filled the space, their voices mixing into an angry buzz that made the air thick with tension. At the center of it all, Ambassador Jake Morrison stood alone behind a simple metal podium, his hands flat on its surface as hundreds of alien eyes stared at him with hate. Jake was 53 years old, his hair more gray than brown now, and his face carried the lines of someone who had spent decades trying to build bridges between worlds that did not want to be connected. Today those bridges were burning, and he could smell the smoke in the recycled air of the council chamber. The Korthak delegate rose first, his lizard-like body covered in green scales that caught the harsh lights above. Vexstar had been speaking against humans for the past 3 years, ever since humanity had refused to share their new jump drive, technology with species that had spent centuries trying to keep humans trapped in their own solar system. "You have broken 17 treaties," Vexstar said, his voice a low growl that carried across the chamber. "Your people build colonies where they should not build them. They mine asteroids that belong to older races. They refuse to follow the laws that keep peace in this galaxy." Jake listened without moving. Behind him, Captain Lisa Hayes stood with her hand near her weapon, her blue eyes watching the crowd like a guard dog ready to fight. Next to her, Admiral Peter Collins kept his face blank, but Jake could see the muscle jumping in his jaw every time another species added their voice to the list of complaints. The Zephyrians floated in their crystal cases, their bodies made of what looked like living light. When they spoke, their voices sang together like a choir, but the words they sang were ugly. Humanity grows too fast, learns too much, wants too much. The young races must know their place in the order of things. One by one, the species that filled the chamber stood to speak against humanity. The Morvani complained that human miners had found better ways to extract metals from dead planets, making Morvani mining companies lose money. The Helian Empire was angry that humans would not give them the secret of instant communication across space, technology that had taken human scientists 200 years to develop. The ancient Vorthak Council, whose members were so old they remembered when Earth was still a single-planet civilization, demanded that humans abandon 12 colony worlds. "These worlds hold too much strategic value," their speaker said through a translator that made his words sound like grinding stone. "Such primitive beings should not control them." Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach as he listened. These were not the voices of allies concerned about peace. These were the voices of bullies who had grown comfortable with weakness and fear the strong. For 50 years, humanity had worked with these species, traded with them, helped them fight. Off pirates and raiders shared technology and food and medicine. Now they spoke of humans like a disease that needed to be controlled. The Corellians, whose homeworld humanity had helped rebuild after a plague nearly wiped them out, now stood with their accusers. The Nexari, whose colonies human ships had defended from attack just 2 years ago, demanded the harshest punishments. Species that had once called themselves friends now looked at humans like enemies that needed to be destroyed. "Your answer," Vexstar hissed, his forked tongue flicking out to taste the air. "The Council has decided humanity will accept oversight from a joint alien government. You will surrender your advanced technologies to be shared equally among all species. You will stop building new colonies and limit your population to 10 billion across all human worlds. You have 72 hours to agree or face the combined might of our fleets." Jake looked around the chamber one more time. 300,000 warships, they had said. The largest military force ever assembled. All pointed at humanity like a gun held to the head of every human man, woman, and child in the galaxy. The message was clear: submit or die. Captain Hayes stepped forward, her voice cutting through the noise. "And if we refuse your generous offer?" The chamber fell quiet. Vexstar's yellow eyes gleamed with something that might have been pleasure. "Then humanity will be removed from the galaxy by force. Your worlds will be occupied, your people relocated to places where they can cause no more trouble. Your ships will be destroyed, your technology confiscated, your influence ended forever." Jake reached into his jacket and pulled out a small communication device. Every human in the galaxy carried one, linked to a network that could reach any human ship or station in seconds. He held it up so the entire chamber could see it, then activated it with his thumb. The message he sent was simple. Just 4 words that had been agreed upon years ago, when humanity first realized this day might come. Implement Protocol 7. Immediately. Across human space, the message reached every ship, every station, every colony world where humans lived and worked. On distant planets, governors received the signal and began following orders they had hoped never to use. In deep space, cargo ships changed course toward jump points at the edge of known space. On research stations, scientists began wiping their computers clean of decades of work. Jake looked up at the sea of alien faces staring down at him. Some looked satisfied, thinking humanity was about to surrender. Others seemed worried, as if they sensed something was wrong. A few, mostly from species that had worked closely with humans, looked confused and afraid. "Ambassador Morrison," Vexstar said, his voice impatient. "The Council requires your answer. Will humanity submit to our authority?" Jake Morrison had spent his entire adult life trying to build friendship between humans and the other species of the galaxy. He had negotiated trade deals that made everyone richer, peace treaties that stopped wars before they started, and research agreements that pushed the boundaries of science forward for all races. He had believed that understanding and cooperation could overcome the fear and jealousy that poisoned relations between species. Today, he learned that some things could not be negotiated, some fears could not be overcome, and some hatred ran too deep to bridge. Jake activated his communicator one more time, sending a message that would reach every human leader, every human ship captain, every human colony governor in the galaxy. Then he looked up at Vexstar and spoke 4 words that would echo through history and haunt the dreams of every species in that chamber. Humanity chooses to leave. Captain Danny Rodriguez stood on the bridge of his cargo ship New Frontier, watching through the wide viewport as something impossible happened in the space around him. Massive human transport vessels were appearing out of hyperspace jumps, their hulls dark against the stars and their cargo bays empty and waiting. He had seen military exercises before, but nothing like this. This was every human ship in the galaxy moving at once. The communication from Ambassador Morrison had reached Danny's ship just 6 hours ago. Those 4 simple words that changed everything. Protocol 7. Danny had hoped he would never hear those words, but every human ship captain had trained for this day. Every human colony had plans locked away in secure files. Every human leader knew what to do when the galaxy finally decided that humanity was too dangerous to live free. Danny activated his ship's communication system and sent the coded message to New Angeles colony below. "This is cargo vessel New Frontier requesting immediate priority loading. All personnel and essential equipment only. We launch in 18 hours. On the planet's surface, Governor Rick Thompson received the message in his office overlooking the capital city that humans had built from nothing on a world that had been empty rock when they arrived. Rick was 41 years old and had spent his entire adult life on New Angeles, watching it grow from a small mining camp to a thriving world of 2 million people. Now he had less than a day to abandon everything they had built. Rick activated the colony's emergency broadcast system. His voice reached every human settlement on the planet at once. "All citizens of New Angeles, this is Governor Thompson. Protocol 7 is now active. Report to your designated evacuation zones immediately. Bring only personal items you can carry. Everything else will be left behind." In the agricultural district, Maria Santos heard the announcement while she was checking the automated farming systems that fed half the sector. She was 34 years old with 2 young children, and she had never imagined she would have to leave the farm her family had worked for 3 generations. But Maria had grown up hearing stories about what happened to species that stayed where they were not wanted. She gathered her children and headed for the transport ships. The evacuation was like nothing anyone had ever seen. Human ships arrived at every human world at almost the same time, as if the entire operation had been planned down to the minute. Transport vessels the size of cities positioned themselves in orbit, while smaller shuttlecraft ferried people and equipment up from the surface. There was no panic, no confusion, just millions of people following plans they had practiced but hoped never to use. Dr. Helen Carter stood in her laboratory on Research Station Kepler, looking at 30 years of work that was about to disappear forever. She was one of the galaxy's leading experts on quantum biology, and her research could have helped every species in known space-cure diseases that had killed billions. But the species of the galaxy had made their choice. They wanted humanity gone, and Dr. Carter would not leave her life's work behind for people who saw her as an enemy. Helen's fingers moved across her computer keyboard, typing in commands that would wipe every hard drive, every backup system, every trace of the research she had spent her life creating. The computers asked her 3 times if she was sure she wanted to delete everything. Each time she typed yes. When she was finished, 30 years of scientific advancement existed only in her memory, and she would take that memory far away from the galaxy that had rejected it. On the industrial world of New Birmingham, factory supervisor Tony Mitchell watched as massive automated machines began dismantling the production facilities that had supplied refined metals to half the galaxy. The machines worked with perfect precision, taking apart in hours what had taken decades to build. Every piece of advanced human technology was loaded onto transport ships. Everything that could not be moved was destroyed. Tony had worked in these factories for 22 years, ever since he graduated from technical school. He had helped design some of the equipment that was now being torn apart and packed away. The factories of New Birmingham produced components that were used in alien ships, alien cities, alien technology across known space. After today, those species would have to figure out how to make these things themselves. Captain Amy Foster commanded the massive colony ship Mayflower II, one of the largest vessels in human space. Her ship was designed to carry entire populations. Between star systems and today, it would carry more people than it was ever meant to hold. Amy received reports from evacuation coordinators across human space as her ship moved from world to world, picking up refugees from the life humanity had built in the galaxy. 43 colony worlds were being abandoned. 18 research stations were being evacuated. 12 industrial complexes were being stripped of everything valuable and then destroyed. Over 2 billion humans were leaving behind everything they had ever known, heading toward the edge of the galaxy and the unknown. Space beyond, the alien species watched from their own ships and stations as the human exodus continued day after day. What had started as satisfaction at humanity's surrender was turning into something else. The Korthak had expected humans to beg, to negotiate, to try to find some way to stay. Instead, humans were leaving completely, taking with them everything they had brought to galactic civilization. On the bridge of the battleship Washington, Admiral Kevin Brooks coordinated the largest fleet movement in human history. 7,000 warships formed protective corridors around the civilian evacuation ships, their weapons powered down but their shields raised against any species that might try to interfere with the withdrawal. Kevin had fought alongside alien allies in 3 different wars, but today those allies were silent as humanity prepared to leave forever. The Galactic Council sent urgent messages demanding explanations, asking why humans were taking so much with them, wanting to know where humanity was going. But human ships had stopped responding to alien communications. Every message from human vessels was the same automated reply. Humanity is complying with the Council's wishes. We are leaving. As the last human transport ship cleared the jump point near Rigel Station, Maintenance Chief Paul Stevens activated the final sequence that would destroy the massive space dock where he had worked for 15 years. The station had serviced ships from dozens of different species, providing fuel and repairs and supplies to anyone who needed them. Paul had helped alien crews fix their ships, had shared human engineering knowledge with species from across the galaxy, had made friends with beings whose names he could barely pronounce. Now, Paul watched through a small viewport as the station that had been his home began to tear itself apart. Controlled explosions ripped through the dock structure, turning 30 years of construction into expanding clouds of metal and plastic. Within minutes, nothing remained but debris drifting. In the darkness of space, Paul sealed his helmet and activated his personal transport beacon. A human rescue ship picked him up 20 minutes later, and as they jumped away toward the Galactic Rim, Paul took one last look at the empty space where Rigel Station had been. He wondered if the alien species who had used the station would understand what they had lost, or if they would even care until their own ships started breaking down with no one left to fix them. 6 months had passed since the last human ship disappeared beyond the Galactic Rim, and Senator Kellerath stood in what remained of the Morvani Coalition's primary industrial complex. The massive factory floors that had once hummed with activity now sat silent, their production lines frozen like metal corpses in the dim emergency lighting. Kellerath was 68 years old and had spent 4 decades in politics, but she had never seen anything like the collapse that followed humanity's departure. The senator activated her recording device and began making her report to the coalition. Leadership. Industrial output has dropped by 73% across all sectors. The manufacturing systems that humans helped us build are failing one by one, and our engineers cannot figure out how to fix them. We are facing complete economic collapse within the year. 300 light-years away, on the crystalline homeworld of the Zephyrians, Elder Sithras floated in his chamber of singing stones, feeling the mineral deficiency that was slowly killing his people. The Zephyrians needed specific rare elements to maintain their crystalline bodies, elements that human mining operations had supplied for the past century. Without those minerals, Zephyrian bodies began to dim and crack like dying gemstones. Sithras had lived for over 400 years, long enough to remember when the Zephyrians first made contact with humanity. Back then, his people had been dying from the same mineral shortage that threatened them now. Human miners had found new deposits of the elements Zephyrians needed, had developed better extraction methods, had kept the Zephyrian race alive when their own mining technology failed them. Now those humans were gone, and Sithras could feel his own crystalline form growing dim as the shortage began to take its toll. In the emergency session of the Galactic Council, Trade Minister Vorak of the Helian Empire delivered his report with shaking hands. Vorak was a proud being who had negotiated trade deals worth trillions of credits, but today his voice cracked as he spoke to the assembled delegates. The economic models show complete galactic recession lasting at least 50 years. Humanity was not just another trading partner. They were the foundation that held our entire economic system together. Their ships carried 60% of all cargo between star systems. Their factories produced 40% of all manufactured goods. Their farms fed populations on 17 different worlds. We thought we were removing a threat, but we destroyed the very thing that kept our civilization running. The Council chamber that had once rung with confident voices demanding humanity's submission now echoed with desperate pleas for solutions that did not exist. The Korthic delegate Vexstar, who had led the campaign against humanity, sat in silence as reports poured in from across his empire. Korthic worlds were running out of food because human agricultural technology had made their farms productive. Korthic ships were breaking down because human engineers had designed their engines. Korthic cities were going dark because human power systems had kept their lights burning. Dr. Zephas, the elderly Corellian scientist who had worked alongside human researchers for 30 years, stood before the council with data tablets clutched in his trembling claws. His people were natural scholars, and Dr. Zephas had spent his entire career studying alongside the brightest minds in the galaxy. Many of those minds had been human. The humans did not just leave, Dr. Zephas announced to the silent chamber. They took their knowledge with them. Every research database has been wiped clean. Every joint project has been abandoned. 3 centuries of shared scientific progress has been erased overnight. We are back to working with the knowledge we had before humanity joined the galactic community. On the industrial world of Krekstar, factory overseer Gorthel walked through production facilities that had once employed millions of his people. The precision manufacturing techniques that humans had taught them were more complex than anyone had realized. Human engineers had not just shared their technology. They had maintained it, improved it, and trained local workers to operate it. Without those engineers, the sophisticated systems were breaking down faster than Krekstar. Technicians could learn to repair them. Gorthel stopped in front of a massive assembly line that had produced components for starships across the galaxy. The line had been shut down for 2 months because a single crucial part had failed, and no one on Krekstar knew how to manufacture a replacement. The blueprints existed, but they were written in human technical language that assumed knowledge his people did not possess. What had seemed like simple manufacturing instructions were actually complex procedures that required years of training to understand. The Nexari faced an even worse crisis. Their military had depended on human-designed defensive systems to protect their borders from the raider fleets that constantly threatened their space. General Dexus sat in his command center watching scanner displays that showed enemy ships massing at the edge of Nexari territory. The raiders had noticed that the defensive systems were failing, and they were preparing to attack worlds that had been protected by human technology for decades. General Dexus activated his communication system and sent a message toward the galactic rim, broadcasting on frequencies that human ships had once monitored. This is General Dexus of the Nexari Defense Force calling any human vessels. Our worlds are under threat. We need the assistance of human military advisors. Please respond. The message vanished into empty space, joining thousands of similar pleas that had received no answer. As the months passed, the true scope of humanity's integration into galactic civilization became clear. Humans had not conquered the galaxy through force or dominated it through superior technology. Instead, they had made themselves essential by being helpful, by solving problems, by making life better for every species they encountered. They had been teachers, engineers, doctors, farmers, soldiers, and friends. Now they were gone, and the galaxy was discovering what life was like without them. The Torian Republic, whose worlds had been kept safe by human peacekeeping forces, watched as old territorial disputes flared into open warfare. Species that had lived in peace under human mediation began fighting over resources and borders that humans had helped them share. The galaxy was not just facing economic collapse, it was fragmenting into the same tribal conflicts that had existed before humanity brought stability to interstellar relations. On the outer rim of known space, automated monitoring stations detected strange readings from the void beyond the galaxy. Long-range sensors picked up massive energy signatures moving through the darkness between galaxies, patterns that suggested construction on a scale that dwarfed anything ever built in their own galactic civilization. The readings were too distant to analyze clearly, but they matched the quantum signatures of human technology. The species of the galaxy began to understand that humanity had not just left to find some empty corner of space where they could hide. They had gone somewhere else, somewhere beyond the reach of galactic civilization, and they were building something new. The readings suggested that humanity was not just surviving in their exile, they were thriving in ways that made their former home seem small and limited. Back in the council chamber, the delegates who had once demanded humanity's submission now sent desperate messages into the void, begging for the return of the species they had driven away. But space between the galaxies was vast and empty, and humanity had made it clear that they had no intention of coming back to a civilization that had rejected them. The galaxy had gotten exactly what it demanded, a future without human interference. Human ambition or human influence? What the alien species were learning was that they had also created a future without human friendship, human protection, and human innovation. A full year had passed since humanity vanished beyond the galactic rim, and Captain Vorthak of the exploration vessel Seeker prepared his ship for the largest search operation in recorded history. The Galactic Council had authorized him to lead a fleet of 200 scout ships toward the edge of known space, carrying messages of peace and desperate offers that they hoped would bring humanity home. Vorthak was the experienced explorer who had mapped more star systems than any other captain in the Korthak fleet, but he had never attempted anything like this mission. His orders were simple: find humanity, and convince them to return before galactic civilization collapsed completely. The reality was much more complicated. Humanity had vanished into a void so vast that finding them would be like searching for a single grain of sand in an endless ocean. The search fleet departed from Rigel Station's replacement facility, a hastily built structure that could barely handle a tenth of the traffic that the old human-built station had managed. As Vorthak's ship jumped toward the galactic rim, he reviewed the data that intelligence services had gathered about humanity's departure. The information painted a picture that made his task seem almost impossible. Humanity had not fled in panic or desperation. Every piece of evidence suggested that their exodus had been planned for years, maybe decades. Hidden supply caches had been discovered along the routes that human ships had taken toward the galactic edge. Fuel depots had been pre-positioned in empty star systems. Navigation beacons had been placed to guide massive fleets through dangerous regions of space that most species avoided. 3 months into the search, Captain Vorthak found the first real clues about humanity's destination. On a dead world near the galactic rim, his landing team discovered an abandoned way station that humans had used during their exodus. The facility was empty, its equipment removed or destroyed, but scanner readings showed that thousands of ships had stopped there to refuel and resupply. Commander Jarek's, Vorthak's second officer, studied the readings from the way station's landing pads. The quantum wake signatures show ships much larger than anything in our database, he reported. Some of these vessels were the size of small cities. Humanity moved their entire civilization through this point. The search continued deeper into the void between galaxies, following quantum trails that grew fainter with each jump. Vorthak's fleet found more abandoned stations, more evidence of humanity's passage, but always the trail led further into empty space where no sane species would try to build a home. The darkness between galaxies was filled with deadly radiation, gravitational anomalies, and distances so vast that even hyperspace travel became dangerous. Ambassador Krellum of the Torian Republic had joined the search mission personally, flying aboard his diplomatic vessel Harmony. Krellum was one of the few voices that had opposed humanity's exile from the beginning, and he carried with him official pardons, trade agreements, and territorial concessions that the Galactic Council had authorized him to offer. The aliens were willing to give humanity almost anything if they would just come back and save galactic civilization from collapse. Krellum spent his days crafting messages that he broadcast into the void ahead of the search fleet. This is Ambassador Krellum of the Torian Republic, calling any human vessels or stations. The Galactic Council acknowledges that we made a terrible mistake. We are prepared to offer humanity full membership in the Council, territorial rights to any systems you choose, and complete autonomy for your species. Please respond. The messages vanished into empty space without answer. Long-range sensors showed no signs of human activity, no response to the increasingly desperate broadcasts from the search fleet. It was as if humanity had simply ceased to exist once they passed beyond the galactic rim. Dr. Sithara, the galaxy's leading expert on human psychology, had also joined the search mission to help understand where humanity might have gone and why they remained silent. She spent her time analyzing the evidence of human preparations, trying to understand the mindset of a species that had planned their own exile years in advance. Her conclusions were disturbing. Humanity saw this coming long before we issued our ultimatum, she explained to Captain Vorthak during one of their daily briefings. They watched as species after species turned against them, as fear replaced friendship, as suspicion grew into hatred. Our demands were not the cause of their departure. They were simply the final confirmation that humanity was no longer welcome in this galaxy. 2 years into the search, the fleet made a discovery that changed everything they thought they knew about humanity's exodus. On a rogue planet drifting in the void between galaxies, they found an abandoned research station that was clearly of human construction. Unlike the other facilities they had discovered, this one had not been completely stripped of equipment. Inside the station, Krellum found a message crystal that had been left behind, apparently on purpose. The crystal contained a recording from Dr. Nancy Williams, a human scientist who had worked at the facility before the Exodus. Her message was brief and direct, delivered in the calm voice of someone who had made peace with a difficult decision. To whoever finds this recording, we tried to be the galaxy's partners, its friends, its protectors when protection was needed, but you feared our growth, our potential, our very existence. You demanded that we submit, be controlled, be contained. Like dangerous animals in a cage, we chose freedom instead. Do not look for us. Do not follow us. Build your own future from the ashes of what we tried to share with you. The message was dated 3 months before the Galactic Council had issued their ultimatum to humanity. Dr. Williams had recorded it while humanity was still officially part of galactic civilization, still trying to maintain the partnerships and friendships that had defined their relationship with other species. Even then, she had known that the relationship was doomed. Captain Vorthak transmitted the recording back to the Galactic Council, along with his own report about the search. Mission's progress. The response came back within hours. Continue the search at all costs. The Council was not ready to accept that humanity was truly gone forever. The search fleet pushed deeper into the void, following quantum trails that grew weaker and more scattered. With each jump, they discovered more abandoned stations, more evidence of human passage, but never any sign of where humanity had finally stopped running. The trails led through regions of space that were barely charted, past dead stars and collapsed star systems, into areas where even the background radiation of the galaxy faded to almost nothing. 3 years into the mission, long-range sensors detected something that made every member of the search fleet hold their breath in hope. Massive energy signatures were moving through the darkness ahead of them, patterns that matched the quantum signatures of human technology. The readings suggested construction on a scale that dwarfed anything ever built in their home galaxy, engineering projects that spanned entire star systems. But when the search fleet arrived at the coordinates where the readings had originated, they found only empty space and a single automated beacon broadcasting a message in human languages. The beacon's transmission was simple and final. We are no longer your concern. Live well in the future you have chosen. Captain Vorthak ordered his fleet to scan the surrounding space for any trace of the massive construction projects that their sensors had detected, but the void was empty. Whatever humanity had built in this region had been moved or hidden beyond the reach of alien technology. The beacon continued its broadcast for 6 hours, then self-destructed in a flash of light that left no debris behind. The search continued for 2 more years, ranging further and further from the galactic rim as the fleet followed every lead. Every sensor reading, every faint hope that they might find some trace of the missing species. But humanity had vanished as completely as if they had never existed, leaving behind only empty space and the echoing silence of their final message. 5 years had passed since humanity disappeared beyond the galactic rim, and Chancellor Vexstar stood alone in the ruins of what had once been the galaxy's largest spaceport. The massive structure stretched for kilometers in every direction, but its halls were empty now, its docking bays silent, its corridors dark except for the emergency lighting that cast long shadows across broken machinery and abandoned cargo. Vexstar was the same Korthak who had led the campaign to force humanity into submission, who had spoken with such confidence about containing the human threat and protecting galactic civilization. Now he walked through the wreckage of that civilization, seeing firsthand what his victory had cost. The spaceport had been built using human engineering and maintained by human technicians, and without them it had slowly fallen apart like a machine missing its most important parts. We told ourselves we were protecting the galaxy, Vexstar said to the empty halls, his voice echoing off the corroded walls. We believed we were preventing human domination of our worlds and our peoples. Instead, we destroyed the very foundation of our civilization, and we did it with our own hands. The Zephyrians had been among the first species to pay the ultimate price for humanity's absence. Their crystalline homeworld now drifted silent in space, its singing cities fallen quiet, one by one as their population died from mineral deficiency. The rare elements that human miners had supplied for over a century were beyond the reach of Zephyrian technology, and no other species had been willing or able to fill the gap that humanity's departure had created. Elder Cythrus had been among the last Zephyrians to die, his crystalline form growing dim and cracked as the minerals his body needed became impossible to find. In his final transmission to the galaxy, he had sung a melody of regret and loss that haunted the memories of every species that heard it. The song spoke of friendship destroyed by fear, of cooperation replaced by suspicion, of a golden age ended by the very people who had benefited most from its existence. On Earth's former moon, Luna Base sat abandoned like a monument to dreams that had died before their time. The vast agricultural domes that had fed billions of people across the galaxy were dark and empty, their automated systems shut down when humanity took their knowledge and expertise to the void between stars. Corellian scientists had finally reached the Sol system 2 years after humanity's departure, hoping to find some clue about where the missing species had gone. Dr. Kethel led the expedition that landed on Earth's surface, the first non-human to set foot on humanity's birthworld. Since the Exodus began, he was an archaeologist who specialized in studying dead civilizations, but he had never expected to excavate the ruins of a species that had voluntarily made itself extinct to galactic civilization. Earth remained beautiful in ways that took Dr. Kethel's breath away. The oceans were still blue, the continents still green with forests and grasslands that had recovered from centuries of human industry. But the planet felt hollow, emptied of the dreams and ambitions that had once reached toward the stars and brought humanity to the attention of the galaxy. In what had once been New York City, Dr. Kethel found the final message that humanity had left for the galaxy. It was carved into a simple stone monument in the middle of what had been Central Park, written in the common galactic language so that any species could read and understand it. "We came to the stars in friendship," the message read. "We offered our knowledge, our strength, our loyalty to those who would accept it. When friendship turned to fear and fear to hatred, we chose to leave rather than fight. The galaxy is yours now. We hope you find the peace that our presence apparently prevented." Dr. Kethel stood before the monument for a long time, reading the words again and again as he tried to understand how the galaxy had reached this point. Humanity had been the most generous species he had ever studied, sharing their technology freely, helping other races solve problems, defending weaker civilizations against threats they could not handle alone. Yet fear of human potential had been stronger than gratitude for human friendship. The Galactic Council still met in their reduced chamber, though fewer species attended each session as the years passed. Some civilizations had collapsed completely. Without human support, their populations scattered or dead, their worlds abandoned to decay. Others had retreated into isolation, focusing on survival rather than the grand cooperation that had once defined galactic civilization. The council members who remained spoke often of reconstruction, of hope, of the lessons they had learned from their greatest mistake. But in the quiet moments between sessions, they listened to the deep space monitoring stations that still scanned the void beyond the galactic rim, hoping for some sign that humanity might return. Those monitoring stations continued to detect strange readings from the darkness between galaxies. Massive energy signatures moved through empty space. Gravitational anomalies suggested construction projects that spanned entire solar systems, and quantum disturbances indicated technology that was advancing far beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. The readings were too distant to analyze in detail, but they all carried the distinctive signatures of human engineering. Some scientists believed that humanity had found something in the void between galaxies, discovered allies or resources that made their former home seem small and unimportant by comparison. The energy patterns suggested that humanity was not just surviving in exile, but thriving in ways that their former neighbors could barely imagine. Others thought that humanity had simply moved beyond the need for galactic civilization entirely. The readings from deep space showed engineering on a scale that dwarfed anything ever built in their home galaxy. Projects that suggested humanity was building something completely new in the empty darkness beyond the stars. but most species simply remembered the silence that had fallen when humanity walked away. A silence that still echoed in empty trade routes, abandoned space stations, and the hearts of those who had learned too late the difference between strength and tyranny, between growth and conquest, between a partner and a threat. The galaxy continued to exist, smaller and quieter than it had been during the golden age of human cooperation. New trade routes slowly formed between surviving civilizations. New alliances emerged from the ashes of the old system, and new technologies developed to replace what had been lost when humanity took their knowledge into exile, children born after. Humanity's departure grew up in a universe where humans existed only in history books and cautionary tales about the dangers of fear and prejudice. They learned about the species that had tried to be friends with everyone, had helped build galactic civilization, and had chosen exile over submission when friendship was no longer enough. In the end, the alien species had gotten exactly what they demanded: a galaxy free from human interference, human ambition, and human influence. What they discovered too late was that they had also created a galaxy without human innovation, human protection, and human friendship, the ashes of what had been remained scattered across 47 worlds that had once prospered under human partnership. The regret echoed in council chambers that had once rung with cooperation and hope, but now held only the bitter knowledge that some mistakes can never be undone. And somewhere in the vast darkness between galaxies, humanity's children built new dreams under alien suns, carrying with them the memory of a galaxy that had chosen fear over friendship, and the determination never to make that choice again.